Former Councilmember Kathy Lambert joining us to give us a deeper insight and history into this issue. Kathy, towards the end of your time in council, around 2020, I should say, you mentioned this issue. There were some red flags for you here, even back in 2020. What was the first sign of trouble here?
Well, I was a chair of the committee that oversaw this, and I was meeting regularly with the head of DCHS and other departments, and a lot of new things were being implemented very rapidly. And I kept saying, we need to be sure that we have the safeguards in place. And when I would say, how many audits have been done? The answer was, well, we don't really know yet. And so on my very last day as a council member, I wrote a bill that said, these need to be audited. And that was completely dismissed. And here we are 5 years later, and now the audit is out.
Yeah, and this audit, again, it's a bombshell. Let's track the latest numbers, because there have been a big revision to the original numbers revealed by the King County Auditor's Office. The audit initially said DCHS gave out $22 million between 2019 to 2020, ballooning to $1.5 billion by 2023 and 2024. But now the Auditor's Office says those numbers were wrong. It's actually $922 million in 2019 to 2020, going up to more than $1.8 billion in grants given out by the department in 2023 and 2024. The Auditor's Office, though, says they realized this after learning that the online county data set they used for DCHS was incomplete for those years. But the Auditor's Office also says, despite that revision, the conclusion is the same, which shows a disturbing pattern of potentially fraudulent grants going to 4 youth programs tied to many different organizations. So, Kathy, we are not talking about just 1 or 2 cases, minor cases. We're talking about widespread issues here. There are some cases where unapproved subcontractors got money, and there are other cases where documents were altered. How is it that DCHS, how did they let this happen?
So first of all, that is the question. This audit jackhammers open the ability to get to accountability and give citizens the right to have a tool to find out truth. This is the tip of an iceberg, and I am so thankful that this iceberg has now been done. There are times when there were audits that showed that contract amounts had been raised. That means changed. And they would just talk to the person, and then it was dismissed. So there were a lot of things that should have been reported as fraud way back. But because they weren't big dollar amounts back then, but over time, as you said, some of these contracts were altered. Some of them were given to people that were no longer working. Some of them were given to subcontractors that were not approved. There was a lot of things going on behind the scenes that should not have been happening, especially when you looked at how many new things were coming on board to people who had not done these kinds of services before. Some of them did not speak English. The contract terms are very difficult. And so we knew that this was not going to be easy for some of the new smaller organizations. And so we put in place that there would be a counselor that could come alongside of these people. And as they told me some of the things that were going on, I said, how many times have these people used the counselors? And they said, oh, well, they're working on it. But in the audit, it shows that of the counselors, only 6% of their time was used for this. And a wise legislator would have said at that point going forward, this seems to be a pattern. And by 2022, that was plenty of time for them to say only 6% is actually getting the help they need for oversight. And then at that point, they should have required everybody get this. Because the most important thing is to be proactive in making sure that money is spent properly.
And the fact that it took 5 years, I mean, you said you brought it up in 2020 and
Yes.
It's taken this long, and all that time money has been wasted.
Yes.
When I asked how much money we're talking about that have been, wasted here, they say they don't know at this point. What is your projection? We're talking about tens of millions of dollars potentially here?
Oh, I would say even more than that, because this is the tip of the iceberg. This is just in a few of the contracts. We're having this go on all through the county. So when people start really understanding what was being hidden, they will begin to see that there are a lot of things that are happening that shouldn't be happening.
So then should we be looking at other programs? Should we be looking at the department as a whole? As you mentioned, they only looked at 4 programs here.
Yes.
You're saying look at all of them?
I say look at all of them. All the requirements in these contracts say that they are to be audited annually, And 33% of them are supposed to have a deep audit every year. And every one of them is supposed to send in a financial account every year, financial statement. And over half of them have not ever sent that in. So there were many warning signs along the way. And when you look at the suggestions, the resolutions that are in Amendment 5, Appendix 5, that the auditor put out, some of those things, if my 7th graders did not know those, I would be very unhappy.
Wow, so there is new legislation going on right now. What needs to be in that legislation in order to hold DCHS accountable really quick?
I don't believe there is a need for new legislation. I think that's covering the backsides of the council members. There are already existing laws. And let me just read basically the county code in financial 15.5.1 EP says that there must be internal controls for efficiency, effectiveness, data reliability, because these are foundational requirements. If you were doing the financial code, you don't need anything more. The contracts already say that you're supposed to send these things in every year. You're supposed to send in invoices that have receipts with them. These are basics. And if they had stayed onto the job that the council should have been doing every single month, this would not have happened.
Criminal prosecution needed? It sounds like this needs a bigger investigation.
Absolutely. And I did yesterday, after reading this report over and over again, I did send my Cliff Notes, which I sent to you, also to see that there's fraud here. And I do believe that the prosecutor and the sheriff should penalize people who were involved in this fraud. It is very difficult to say, I approved all of these invoices, but they didn't have any receipts. That is what they call wanton disregard. And that is a criminal offense. And that is wanton disregard. Everybody that's being paid to make sure that the county resources, taxpayers' money, is being spent wisely should know that when you pay an invoice, you need receipts. So no, I don't think there needs to be any more laws. I think the existing laws need to be enforced, and I think the people who did not enforce the existing laws need to be criminally prosecuted.
Anything else that you want to mention? I know you read that audit front to back.
Many times. Each time I read something different in it, because this auditor is an excellent auditor. I've read her audits for years, and she put in lots of nuggets that were red flags along the way. And I have to give her credit for her integrity and her braveness to write down in this audit so many things and make suggestions like, don't pay somebody that hasn't been on the payroll or shouldn't be on the payroll anymore. She shouldn't have had to do that. And that she had the bravery to step up and say, this is so big and so deep and so common sense that she made it very clear that this goes into the fraud category.
All right, Kathy Lambert, former King County Council member, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you. I hope the taxpayers benefit.